Why did everyone go silent when she spoke that single word? The laughter had filled the air moments ago, sharp, careless, carried by the kind of confidence only youth and ignorance can grant. It was just another training morning at Coronado, salt in the air, boots pounding gravel, the metallic clang of weapons mixed with the whistle of command. The rookies, still too green to understand what real fear felt like, were loose after the morning run. And then they saw her. A woman standing near the range, still as stone. No insignia, no medals, plain uniform, plain stance. She didn't fit the scene, didn't belong to any squad or command roster they knew. She just watched, taking notes. Quiet. Boon Castellano noticed her first. 28 years old, shoulders squared by generations of legacy. Grandfather a frogman in Vietnam. Father a SEAL who never came back from a mission Boon still couldn't read the details of. People said his name with respect, and Boon wore that legacy like a double-edged blade, half pride, half burden. He was the kind who led from the front because silence scared him, who filled every pause with action, every doubt with another sprint, another push, another round. Behind him his squad kept pace. Zarya Capper, former Olympic swimmer turned soldier, all control and calculation. Rafe Thatcher, the wiry tactician who thought faster than anyone else could move. And Quinlan Frost, the quiet marksman no one really knew. They were different pieces of the same machine, united by exhaustion, competition, and the constant need to prove they belonged. But this woman, she threw them off balance. Who's she? Rafe muttered as he wiped sweat from his brow. Observer maybe, contractor, Boon guessed. We've had auditors before. Contractors wear tags, Zarya noted softly. She doesn't. It should have ended there. A curious glance, a few whispers, and back to training. But pride has a way of taking the smallest spark and feeding it until it burns. When the exercise ended, Boon set his rifle down, curiosity outweighing caution. He walked toward her, boots crunching over gravel, his squad drifting a few steps behind. She didn't move, didn't even look up. Just kept writing, one note at a time. "Excuse me, ma'am," Boon began, polite but firm, the kind of tone that said I belong here and you might not. "This is a restricted training area." "I'm aware," she said without looking up. It was the calmest voice he'd ever heard, steady, controlled. Boon hesitated. "Then you'll understand why I have to ask who authorized your presence." "I did." The pen moved again, one stroke after another. No pause, no explanation. Zarya exhaled softly, amused and cautious all at once. Rafe shifted his weight, uncomfortable. The air between them thickened. And Boon, he smiled. Not a kind smile, a confident one edged in challenge. "Then maybe you could tell us your rank, ma'am, just so we know who we're dealing with." The others chuckled under their breath. It was light, teasing, until she looked up. Steel-gray eyes met his, and every ounce of bravado in him evaporated. It wasn't anger in her gaze. It was something far more dangerous, recognition. She studied him for one long, unbearable second, then said a single word. "Admiral." The world froze. Even the wind seemed to stop moving. Before any of them could react, Commander Arcturus Blackwell appeared at Boon's side, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Admiral Marshfield, ma'am, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow." The rookies turned pale. The loudspeaker crackled overhead. "Attention all personnel. Vice Admiral Deline Marshfield, Deputy Commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, is conducting an unscheduled inspection." The word Admiral echoed again, like a weight slamming into their chests. Boone's mouth went dry. He tried to speak, but she raised a hand, a small gesture, but it silenced him instantly. "Save it, Candidate Castellano." She knew his name. "Your performance speaks for itself, both the good and the problematic." Then she turned, gave Blackwell a nod and said only, "Carry on." No lecture, no punishment, just quiet dismissal. As she walked away, Boon noticed something subtle, a faint asymmetry in her stride. A limp maybe, or a prosthetic, hard to tell, but it wasn't weakness, it was history carried in motion. He caught a glimpse of a scar near her wrist as her sleeve shifted, a pattern he'd seen once in medical training slides: defensive wounds, close combat, survival. Behind him, Zarya whispered, "You just sassed a vice admiral." "How was I supposed to know?" he hissed back. "By not assuming," Quinlan said, voice flat as always. "Assumption is the first step toward failure." The words hung heavier than they should have. That night the squad barely spoke. Every candidate on base had heard about the encounter by sundown. The rookies who had laughed now stared at Boone's team like they'd touched a live wire. The Admiral had a reputation that preceded her: classified missions, operations without names, campaigns with no medals because the paperwork didn't exist. Some said she'd commanded black ops before most of them were out of high school. And now she was here watching them, personally. Why? Over the next week, her presence became routine and terrifying. She appeared at random: the obstacle course at dawn, the pool at midnight, the range during live fire. Always watching, always writing, never speaking unless necessary. Instructors who normally barked orders now second-guessed themselves when she was near. The atmosphere changed. The air thickened. Candidates washed out faster than ever before, good ones, steady ones, gone overnight. Rumors spread like oil on water. She's cutting the class. She's testing Blackwell. She's starting a purge. But no one could ask, no one dared. And then something happened that changed everything. During a late-night navigation drill, Zarya found the first crack. Their compass calibration was off, by just enough to lead them miles off course into restricted terrain. A mistake like that could have gotten someone killed. "This wasn't an accident," she whispered as they recalibrated. "Someone tampered with our gear." Rafe frowned, scanning the compass. "You sure?" "I've been reading these since I was 12. This was deliberate." She reported it in the morning. Commander Blackwell dismissed her concerns. "Candidate Capper, you're running on 4 hours of sleep. Focus on your objectives." But that same evening, Boon overheard something he wasn't supposed to. He'd stayed late after an authorized call to his mother. Walking back through the dim corridor, he caught voices, low, sharp, unmistakable. "This is the third incident this month," a woman said. Calm, cold, he froze. "Admiral Marshfield." "With respect, Admiral," Blackwell replied, his tone edged with frustration. "These are training scenarios designed to test adaptability." "These aren't training variables," Marshfield said, voice clipped. "Someone is testing us, testing response patterns. I've seen this before." There was silence, then her next words quieter but heavier. "Keep your eyes open, Commander. Trust no one you haven't personally vetted." Boone's heart pounded. What was she talking about, testing us? When he returned to his quarters, he couldn't sleep. That phrase, "I've seen this before," kept looping in his head. The next morning, he found her in the tactics room, alone, reviewing files. He hesitated before stepping in. "Admiral Marshfield," he began, posture rigid, "I owe you an apology for my behavior." She looked up, studied him. Arrogance is a luxury afforded to those who haven't faced combat. Her tone wasn't cruel, just true. "Your father understood that." The words hit like a physical blow. "You knew my father." She closed the folder slowly. "Staff Sergeant James Castellano, exceptional operator, even better man. He saved 11 lives during Operation Kingfisher." "Kingfisher?" Boone's throat tightened. "The record says 7. Remember that discrepancy." She said it like a secret, like an unfinished sentence. Then she nodded toward the door. "Your squad's waiting. Don't keep them waiting, candidate." Boon saluted automatically, but his thoughts were chaos. Kingfisher, his father, 11 lives classified. That night he searched. Every mention of Kingfisher was redacted, buried. One blurred photo, an old operation team. And there in the background, a woman with the insignia of a commander, short hair, same eyes. It couldn't be. But it was. The next day, live rounds appeared in their training magazines, real bullets mixed with training ammo. The exercise was halted immediately. A near disaster. Someone was sabotaging them. The base tightened security, but Marshfield's calm never wavered. And when Boon saw her again that night, standing alone under the floodlights by the docks, speaking in hushed tones to a man in an unmarked vehicle, he finally understood. This wasn't just an inspection. Something darker was moving beneath the surface, something she hadn't told them. Not yet. Why was she meeting a civilian after midnight? And why did she look afraid for the first time? Boon stood half-hidden in the shadows near the administrative parking lot, the cold wind off the Pacific biting through his fatigues. The night air carried every sound, the distant crash of waves, the hum of generators, the quiet rhythm of his own pulse. The civilian spoke in clipped tones, sharp gestures, the kind that didn't belong to bureaucrats. Marshfield stood opposite him, her posture unflinching, but her voice, though too low to hear, carried a weight that made the man's jaw tighten. She shook her head once, slow and deliberate. Whatever he was proposing, she wasn't agreeing to it. The conversation ended abruptly. The man turned, climbed into a black government vehicle with no plates, and drove off into the dark without headlights. Marshfield stayed where she was, staring after him for a long moment. Then she turned slightly, enough for Boon to see the faint strain in her expression. She wasn't angry, she was calculating, worried. When her eyes flicked toward him, he froze. But she didn't call him out, didn't even acknowledge him beyond a faint nod, as if to say, "You shouldn't be here, but maybe you needed to see this." Then she walked away, vanishing into the night. Boon stood there long after she was gone. The salt air stung his eyes, but it wasn't the cold that made his hands shake. Something was wrong at Coronado, deeply wrong. The next morning, everything felt off balance. Rafe noticed it first. Pattern recognition was his gift. "Security's doubled near the south compound," he said quietly as they geared up. "Patrol routes shifted. That's not for a training drill." Zarya frowned. "You think it's connected to the live ammo incident?" "Maybe, or to whoever she met last night." They all turned toward Boon. He hadn't told them how much he'd seen, but his silence said enough. He only nodded. "Keep eyes open, trust your instincts." Training that day felt different. Commander Blackwell's voice carried more tension than authority. Even his sharp corrections sounded distracted. Marshfield was there again, off to the side, her silver hair catching the sunlight as she took notes with surgical precision. She wasn't just observing anymore, she was hunting. Later that day, when the rest of the candidates were dismissed for chow, Marshfield pulled Commander Blackwell aside near the range. Their conversation was short, but the commander's reaction was unmistakable: shock, disbelief, and then reluctant understanding. Rafe watched through the reflection of a vehicle mirror. Whatever she told him, it wasn't good news. "She's running something," Boon said, "something he didn't know about." "She's a vice admiral," Zarya muttered. "She runs everything." But Boon shook his head. "Not like this." That night the squad met secretly in the maintenance shed behind the obstacle yard. The air smelled like oil and dust, the only light a small flashlight balanced on a crate. Rafe spread out a rough map of the base. "I've been tracking all the equipment failures, the accidents, the drops. It's not random. Someone's targeting specific candidates." "Targeting how?" Zarya asked. "Tampered gear, altered schedules, shuffled evaluation reports. It's subtle, hidden under normal training variants, but it's systematic." Boon stared at the map. Every mark was a name, candidates who had washed out or voluntarily withdrawn. Each one represented someone strong, smart, reliable, People who shouldn't have failed. Who benefits from that? Zarya asked. Rafe met her gaze. Someone who wants to control who gets through the program. Or who doesn't, Boon added quietly. The door creaked open behind them. Instinctively, Zarya drew her utility knife, Boon his flashlight in a defensive stance. The silhouette that stepped through was tall, broad-shouldered, unmistakable. Commander Blackwell. "Stand down," he said, voice low. He closed the door behind him and secured it. The look in his eyes wasn't one of discipline. It was of someone carrying a burden too long alone. "You're right," he said. "This isn't standard training anymore." The three exchanged uneasy glances. "Admiral Marshfield isn't here for inspection," he continued. "She's here because we have a mole in the program." A long silence followed. "A mole," Zarya repeated. "Someone been grooming candidates, planting sleeper assets. It's been happening across multiple facilities." Boon felt his stomach drop. "You're saying—" "I'm saying," Blackwell cut in, "that some of the people training beside you aren't here to serve. They're here to infiltrate." He looked each of them in the eye. "And she's been sent to expose it before it spreads any further." Rafe leaned forward. "Why tell us?" "Because tomorrow you'll be separated for individual assessment," Blackwell said. "Once that happens, I can't protect you. You needed to hear this now." He left as quietly as he'd come, leaving the three of them alone with the echo of his words. When the morning came, Quinlan Frost's bunk was empty. His gear gone, no warning, no farewell. Just an official note posted at the barracks door. "Candidate Frost has voluntarily withdrawn." No one believed it. Not when Boon found Frost's combat knife hidden beneath his mattress, along with a sealed envelope and a small encrypted device. He barely had time to process it before the door burst open, and a team of armed security personnel flooded in. "Candidate Castellano," the lead officer said, "you're coming with us." Zarya shouted something as they pulled him out, but the noise drowned her out. The walk to the administrative wing felt endless. Every eye followed him. Every step tightened the knot in his chest. They led him into a secure room where Admiral Marshfield waited alone. She dismissed the guards with a single gesture. "Sit." Boon obeyed, his mind racing. "Ma'am, I didn't." "I know," she interrupted softly. Her calm unnerved him more than shouting ever could. She reached into her pocket and placed something on the table between them, a coin. Worn, heavy, engraved with the trident of the Special Warfare Command. "I believe this belongs to you," she said. Boon's breath caught. He knew that coin. His father had carried one just like it. "Your father gave this to me before Operation Kingfisher," she said. "He gave one to every member of the team." He stared at it, the weight of 15 years pressing on his chest. "You were there," he whispered. "I was," she said quietly, "and I lost my leg that day." She rolled up her pant leg, revealing a prosthetic. "Sniper fire. We were compromised from within." The room seemed smaller suddenly. "Your father saved 11 lives that day," she continued. "The report said 7 because the rest weren't supposed to exist. We were running a parallel mission, tracking compromised officers within our own ranks." "Like now?" She nodded. "Exactly like now." Boon's thoughts spun out of control. So my father, he wasn't just a SEAL, he was part of this same fight. Marshfield's gaze softened for the first time. He died for it. Before he could respond, the lights flickered, then died completely. Red emergency glow flooded the room. Sirens blared across the base. Marshfield stood immediately, her movements controlled, efficient. She opened a hidden compartment under the table and withdrew a sidearm. "They're making their move," she said. "Who?" "The ones we're hunting. They're not after you, Castellano. They're after me." Outside, footsteps thundered past. Through the window, Boon saw armed units moving across the grounds, but their formation was wrong. too coordinated, too aggressive. "They're not responding to an attack," he said. "They're executing one." Marshfield loaded her weapon. "Exactly." She tossed him a small access card. "Find Capper and Thatcher. East Utility Tunnel leads to the comms center. If I'm not there in 20 minutes, head to the Harbor Master's office. Use frequency 739er. Authenticate with code phrase Kingfisher Asset Secure." "What happens then?" Marshfield allowed herself a small, grim smile. "Then we find out if you're truly your father's son." A deep, distant thud shook the windows, the sound of a controlled detonation. Alarms wailed higher. From the bay, Boon heard the heavy chop of rotor blades. Helicopters. Multiple. He turned toward the window. "How are they inside the perimeter?" Marshfield's voice was calm amid the chaos. "Because they've always been inside." For a heartbeat, she looked almost haunted, then composed again, every ounce the officer who had seen too many battles. "Move Castellano." He hesitated, wanting to ask more. About his father, about Kingfisher, about what she wasn't saying, but her tone left no room. He ran. The corridor outside was chaos. Security teams, flickering lights, shouting voices that no longer sounded like SEAL instructors but like strangers wearing borrowed authority. As Boon sprinted through the darkened hall, her final words echoed in his mind. "Trust no one wearing rank they haven't earned." And somewhere in the distance, the sound of the first explosion rolled across the base like the opening note of a war they didn't yet understand. How do you know who to trust when everyone wears the same uniform? The base was red. Sirens blared across the night like living things, filling every corridor with panic and confusion. Emergency lights pulsed overhead, bathing faces in crimson. Somewhere distant, another explosion rolled across the compound, not random, not chaotic, but deliberate. Boon moved fast through the maze of hallways, his boots hammering against the concrete floor. He passed faces he didn't recognize, instructors, officers, security personnel, all moving with too much coordination to be reacting to an emergency. They weren't responding, they were executing. He remembered Marshfield's voice. "They're not here for you, they're here for me." The utility tunnel entrance loomed ahead, half obscured behind a maintenance sign. He swiped the card she'd given him. The access light flickered green, then the heavy door opened with a hydraulic hiss. Cold air rushed up from the tunnel below, carrying the metallic scent of machinery and salt water. "Boon!" He turned, weapon ready, only to see Zarya sprinting toward him, Rafe at her side. Both were armed, both wide-eyed but steady. "You're alive," she breathed out. "Barely." "What's happening?" Rafe demanded, his voice sharp but controlled. "She was right," Boon said. "This isn't a drill, we've got infiltrators on base. They're after Marshfield." "How do you know?" "Because she told me." Rafe didn't waste time questioning. He scanned the tunnel entrance. "We need comms. If she's heading to the communications center, that's our rally point." They slipped inside, sealing the door behind them. The tunnel stretched ahead, narrow and dim, humming with the low thrum of power generators beneath the compound. Boon led, flashlight cutting through the dark. "She said if she's not there in 20 minutes, we're supposed to reach the Harbor Master's office," he whispered. "Use her code, Kingfisher Asset Secure." Zarya nodded but kept her weapon raised. "You realize what that means, right? Kingfisher was your father's operation." "I know." The silence that followed wasn't just fear. It was recognition that everything they'd believed about training, about loyalty, was fracturing. Halfway through the tunnel, they heard movement ahead. Footsteps, voices, male, armed. Rafe gestured for silence. They slipped behind a maintenance alcove, barely visible in the half-light. Two figures passed security uniforms, rifles slung, their movements too precise. Not panicked, not responding to any emergency. Rafe mouthed, "They're not ours." When the men vanished down another corridor, Zarya exhaled softly. "We're surrounded by ghosts." "Keep moving," Boon ordered. The comm center was sealed when they reached it, reinforced doors locked tight. The keypad flashed red, demanding biometric clearance. "Her card doesn't open this," Rafe muttered, frustrated. Boon pressed his palm to the steel as if he could will it open. "She said she'd be here." "Or she's already gone," Zarya said. "Boon, listen." But before she could finish, the door suddenly hissed open from the inside. Admiral Marshfield stood there, sidearm drawn, her uniform dusty, her calm intact. "You took your time." "Ma'am," Boon said, breathless, "the base is compromised. There are hostiles in security gear." "I know." "How many?" "Too many to count, which means we've run out of time." Behind her, screens flickered to life, security feeds showing chaos across the compound. Personnel evacuating, others moving in unnerving unison toward the same sectors. Marshfield moved with purpose, pulling up encrypted files. "This is no longer a local breach. We've confirmed simultaneous security failures at 2 other training facilities, Little Creek and Fort Bragg." Zarya's eyes widened. "All special warfare centers." "Exactly. Someone coordinated this." "Who?" Boon asked. Marshfield turned toward him. "Someone who understands our systems, our rhythms, our trust." She inserted a drive into the central console. The monitors filled with data, names, service records, evaluations. "These are candidate profiles," Rafe said, scanning the list. "Across multiple bases." "Patterns," Marshfield replied. "Behavioral metrics. Someone been collecting data on our recruits for years." "Recruiting?" Zarya asked. "No, replacing." The word hit like a physical impact. Marshfield zoomed in on a highlighted section, encrypted communications routed through official channels but originating off-grid. "They're building sleeper assets, candidates trained by us, vetted by us, who will deploy as operators and activate later." Boon felt the chill run down his spine. "Quinlan." Marshfield's gaze met his. "Exactly." The name hung between them, heavy and bitter. "He's one of them?" Rafe asked. "Not just one," Marshfield said. "He was placed, groomed, monitored. He's been reporting on you for months." Zarya's voice cracked. "We trained with him, slept in the same barracks, ate from the same trays." "That's how infiltration works," Marshfield said quietly. "You don't suspect the ones beside you. That's why they chose this method." A low rumble shook the building. Somewhere outside, gunfire erupted, short, controlled bursts. Rafe checked the feeds. "Base security's engaging near the docks. Looks like a containment perimeter." "Not containment," Marshfield corrected. "Extraction." Boon stepped forward. "Then we stop them." Her expression didn't change. "We can't stop all of them, not yet, but we can expose them." "How?" "By surviving." Before he could ask, the alarm's shifted tone, a deeper, harsher sound. Marshfield's jaw tightened. "They've breached this sector. Move." They exited through a secondary stairwell leading down toward the armory access. The stairwell walls vibrated with the sound of impacts above, controlled detonations designed to breach bulkheads without destroying the structure. Halfway down, Rafe stopped, checking his portable scanner. Thermal signatures ahead, 3 contacts. Marshfield took point, weapons free if necessary. When they rounded the corner, they found 3 base security personnel crouched near the junction, weapons drawn. But their patches were wrong. Old insignia, outdated. Zarya saw it first. "Those aren't standard issue." Boon raised his rifle. "Drop your weapons." The lead man turned, his eyes blank, his movements mechanical. "Authorization code Delta 1." A single shot cut him off. Marshfield didn't hesitate. The man dropped instantly. The others fired wildly in panic before being neutralized in seconds. When the smoke cleared, she holstered her weapon. They were already gone, she said flatly. Conditioned. Probably didn't even know who they worked for anymore. Boon stared at the bodies. We're fighting ghosts in our own uniforms. That's the price of deception, Marshfield said quietly. It doesn't just hide truth, it erases identity. They reached the armory. Inside, red emergency lights flickered across racks of rifles, gear, and sealed ammunition lockers. Marshfield moved to a secured case and withdrew a compact comms array. This connects to an encrypted frequency outside the base network, she explained. Direct line to command, but if I activate it from here, they'll trace the source. Then what do we do? Rafe asked. She looked up, her eyes calm and sharp. We make them come to us. The words barely registered before the building shook violently. Dust cascaded from the ceiling. Helicopters inbound, Zarya shouted, checking the monitor feed. 3, maybe 4. Extraction, Marshfield said again. They're pulling their assets. What about you? Boon asked. Her expression hardened. They'll try to take me alive. They need leverage. And what do we do? You hold the perimeter until I reach the harbor. No way, Boon said immediately. We're not leaving you. She turned to him, her gaze sharp but not unkind. Your father said the same thing once. The words froze him. He disobeyed to protect his team. It saved lives, but it cost him his own. Boon's throat tightened. Then I'll make the same choice. For a long moment she studied him, as if seeing the reflection of a man she once knew. Then she nodded slightly. Very well, but if this goes wrong, you get them out. Understood. Gunfire erupted outside. The roar of helicopter rotors grew louder, closer. Shadows flickered through the red light as figures descended on cables, faceless silhouettes against the night. Rafe threw himself behind a crate, returning fire with precise bursts. Zarya moved beside him, calm and fast, her movements as fluid as water. Boon covered the flank, counting each shot, every motion synchronized by instinct. Marshfield worked at the comms terminal, typing with speed and precision. Just another 30 seconds. Boon reloaded, shouted over the chaos. Ma'am, we're running out of ammo. Hold the line. An explosion tore through the outer wall, throwing them all to the ground. Dust filled the air. Boon's ears rang. When his vision cleared, he saw Marshfield pinned beneath a fallen beam. Admiral. He rushed to her side, lifting the debris with all his strength. She grimaced, pushing herself free. I'm fine. Her leg, the prosthetic, was damaged, sparks flickering faintly near the joint. Still, she stood, steadying herself with one hand on the table. The comms array flashed green. Transmission sent. To who? Rafe asked, panting. To the only people left who can clean this up. Who's that? Marshfield looked toward the open breach, where dark figures regrouped beyond the dust. Us. They moved again, fighting through corridors that now looked like war zones. Every light was shattered, every door breached. Boon's lungs burned, his thoughts a blur of noise and instinct. Somewhere behind them, a voice shouted orders, calm, commanding, familiar. Quinlan Frost. The sound of it hit harder than the explosions. Boon froze for a split second, disbelieving. Move, Marshfield barked. But the damage was done. The hesitation cost them seconds, and in that sliver of time, Quinlan's men found their position. Bullets tore through the metal walls. Zarya returned fire, covering their retreat. Rafe shouted coordinates into his headset, rerouting their escape path. Boon grabbed Marshfield, half guiding, half carrying her down the emergency stairwell toward the lower docks. When they reached the base's east tunnel exit, the air outside was thick with smoke. The harbor lights were gone, replaced by flashes of muzzle fire and the mechanical thunder of rotor blades overhead. Marshfield leaned against the wall, breathing hard but composed. Ma'am, Boon began. She cut him off with a raised hand. They think they've contained us. They haven't. A helicopter screamed overhead. For a brief moment, Boon caught the silhouette of a man leaning from the side door, weapon ready. The face illuminated by the searchlight was unmistakable. Quinlan Frost. Their eyes met across the chaos. Mentor turned enemy, comrade turned ghost. And in that moment, Boone understood the truth Marshfield had been circling since the beginning. This wasn't just about moles or security breaches. It was about inheritance, fathers and sons, teachers and soldiers, loyalty and betrayal passed down like a curse. The helicopter veered away, banking toward the open sea. Marshfield straightened. This isn't over. Boone met her gaze. No, he said quietly, it's just beginning. And as the dawn broke over the burning base, the light revealed something that no one could yet name, the beginning of a war fought not for territory or power, but for the truth buried inside their own ranks. Why do some battles begin only after the shooting stops? The base was silent now, not peaceful, but hollow. Smoke drifted over the water, glowing faintly in the sunrise. The smell of gunpowder and burned metal clung to the air. A few wounded personnel staggered along the shoreline, medics moving like ghosts between them. Boone sat on the edge of the pier, hands trembling as he tried to wrap a torn bandage around his arm. His body ached, but his mind hurt worse. Zarya stood beside him, rifle slung, face streaked with soot. Rafe crouched near a destroyed comms crate, pulling salvageable tech into a pack. They were alive, barely. The rest of the compound was gone, compromised, destroyed, or evacuated. Admiral Marshfield was the only one who still looked like she belonged there. She stood near the ruined dock, her uniform tattered, her prosthetic leg stiff and scorched, her posture unbroken. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet. Casualty reports show 37 dead, 12 missing. Most of the missing were candidates. Taken, Rafe muttered. Yes, she said, extracted by the same group that infiltrated us. Zarya's voice trembled slightly. Quinlan. Marshfield nodded once. He's leading them now. He's not acting alone. Boone stood, his jaw tight. Then let's go after him. Marshfield turned her gaze toward the horizon, where the sea met the faint outline of ships on the distant blue. If we move now, we'll die before we get close. Whoever orchestrated this has resources, clearance, access to our systems. You don't fight ghosts by charging into the dark. Her tone wasn't dismissive, it was protective, heavy. Boone clenched his fists. We can't just wait. No, she said softly, but we can prepare. She limped toward a small vessel moored at the far end of the dock, one of the few undamaged boats. As she moved, the morning light caught the edges of her silver hair and the faint scar that curved just beneath her jawline. It wasn't a wound of pride, but of survival. Get on board, she said. We're leaving. Where? Zarya asked. Someplace they won't look for us, yet. The boat cut through the water, its engine muffled beneath a canopy of gray sky. No one spoke for a long time. Boone stared at the waves, his reflection shifting with every ripple. The images from the night before kept replaying, Quinlan's face, the sound of explosions, Marshfield's calm voice under fire. He finally asked the question that had been burning since dawn. Why us? Marshfield looked up from the navigation console. Because you were never supposed to survive last night. Rafe frowned, meaning. You were targeted, she said. Your team. Every operation since week 1 was designed to test your reactions under artificial stress. Someone was watching for potential threats, recruits who might see through the cover. So they tried to break us, Zarya said quietly. And you didn't break. There was silence, filled only by the hum of the engine and the soft rhythm of the waves. Marshfield's voice softened. Your father was the same, Boone. He saw the rot before the rest of us did. That's why Kingfisher was launched, not just as an operation, but as a cleansing. We failed then because we underestimated how deep it went. I don't plan to repeat that mistake." She opened a metal case beside her and handed each of them a black identification card, blank, except for a small embedded chip. "These are ghost credentials," she said. "Off-grid. They'll give us access to resources but not trackable through standard Navy systems." Rafe examined his. "You planned for this." "I've been planning for 20 years." Her gaze drifted to the horizon, eyes unfocused for a moment, not lost, but remembering. "I was supposed to retire after Kingfisher. I'd earned it. But the day I signed the papers, I got an anonymous message. 3 words you didn't finish." The weight of her tone silenced them. "I never found out who sent it, but they were right." Boon watched her carefully. "You think the same network survived?" "I don't think," she said. "I know." She pointed toward the GPS screen. "We're heading to Point Delta, a decommissioned listening post off San Miguel. It was used for Pacific surveillance until the late 90s. I had it reactivated 5 years ago under a different name." Zarya raised an eyebrow. "You rebuilt a spy station without command approval." Marshfield almost smiled. "I stopped asking for permission when I realized corruption wears stars as easily as stripes." The station appeared after an hour, an isolated structure perched against black cliffs, half hidden by fog. It looked abandoned, forgotten. As the boat approached, a small section of the dock lowered automatically, guided by remote access. Marshfield entered a code on her wrist comm, and the base came alive, lights flickering, internal systems humming. Inside, the air smelled of dust and salt. But everything worked, old computers reawakening, screens glowing with green monochrome light. "This is where we regroup," Marshfield said. "From now on, we move unseen." Boon set down his gear, and then, she said, turning toward the main terminal, "we hunt." That night they gathered in the operations room. A single lamp cast long shadows across the steel floor. The ocean outside crashed against the cliffs, steady and cold. Marshfield stood before a map projected on the wall, global, dotted with red marks. "These," she said, pointing to the clusters, "are the known training facilities where data anomalies have been found. Unauthorized communications, deleted personnel logs. The pattern repeats every 3 years, recruitment cycles." Rafe leaned forward. "So whoever's behind this is embedding assets every cycle." "Correct," she said. "We're looking at an infiltration program that's at least 15 years deep." Zarya crossed her arms. "And command doesn't know." "Some do, most don't want to." Boon's voice broke the silence. "So what's the objective? Why replace our people?" Marshfield met his eyes. "Control. You can't fight a war you don't control the narrative of. Replace enough operators, you control the missions, the outcomes, the secrets." Rafe nodded slowly. "Plausible deniability built from within." "Exactly." Boon rubbed his forehead, exhaustion mixing with anger. "And Quinlan's just one piece of it." "Not just a piece," Marshfield said. "He's a bridge between us and them, between what we train and what they corrupt." For a moment no one spoke. The sound of waves filled the silence. Finally Zarya said, "What's the plan, ma'am?" Marshfield turned to them. "We build a shadow team, small, mobile, unrecorded. The fewer who know we exist, the safer we are." Rafe smirked faintly. "Ghost SEALs." Marshfield didn't smile back. "Don't glamorize it. You'll have no backup, no extraction, no record of service. If you die as civilians. Understand that before you agree." Boon's answer was instant. "I'm in." Zarya nodded. "Me too." Rafe sighed, half a smile tugging at his lips. "I didn't like paperwork anyway." Marshfield's gaze softened briefly. "Then you understand what this means. You don't serve a flag anymore. You serve the truth." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "And that truth will ask more of you than loyalty ever could." The words sank deep, not as command but as confession. That night, as the others rested in the barracks wing, Boon stood on the cliff outside, staring at the sea. The moon hung low, casting silver across the waves. He thought of his father, a man he barely remembered but whose shadow lived in every order, every instinct. He thought of Marshfield's limp, her scars, her unshakable calm, and of Quinlan, someone he'd trusted with his life. When Marshfield approached quietly behind him, he didn't turn. "Do you ever stop thinking about it?" he asked softly. "What?" "The people we couldn't save." She didn't answer right away. Her gaze followed the horizon. "No, you just learn to live with the echoes." He nodded slowly. "You were right about trust. And you were right about action." She glanced at him, the faintest hint of pride behind her composure. "You remind me of him, you know, your father, the same fire." Boone's throat tightened. "He died in silence. They buried the truth with him." "Not all of it," she said. "You're what he left behind." He looked at her then, not as an admiral, but as someone who carried the same ghosts he did. "Why did you keep his coin?" She exhaled. "Because it reminded me that honor doesn't need witnesses." The wind picked up, cold and sharp. Boone looked down at the waves crashing below. "What happens if we fail?" he asked. Marshfield's voice was steady. "Then they win quietly, and the world never knows it lost." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she placed a hand on his shoulder, firm, grounding. "Get some rest. We start tomorrow." As she walked away, the moonlight caught the worn trident coin hanging from her fingers. She turned it once, the metal glinting briefly before she pocketed it again. Boone stayed on the cliff until the first light of dawn painted the sea in pale gold. Somewhere in that horizon, Quinlan was out there, building something that could erase everything they believed in. But Boone wasn't afraid anymore. He finally understood what Marshfield meant when she said some wars never make headlines. Because the quiet ones, the ones fought in the shadows, decide whether the rest of the world ever learns what courage really costs. Why do the ghosts we hunt always look like someone we used to trust? The station's lights buzzed faintly in the early hours, casting a cold glow across the steel walls. The ocean outside roared against the cliffs like a warning no one could interpret. Inside, 4 people prepared for a war they couldn't officially fight. Boone adjusted his gear methodically, movements sharp, controlled. Zarya cleaned her rifle for the 3rd time in an hour. Rafe typed silently at the operations console, code scrolling across his monitor in fast, relentless lines. And Admiral Marshfield watched them all calm, composed, her expression unreadable. "Before we start," she said quietly, "I want you to understand something." They turned toward her. "This isn't revenge," she continued. "If we chase ghosts out of anger, we'll become them. This is about precision, not fury." Her voice carried that strange duality Boone had come to recognize, command and compassion woven into one. He nodded, understood. Zarya strapped her weapon and exhaled. "So what's our target?" Marshfield pointed to a series of coordinates on the wall map. Encrypted transmissions leaving Coronado began routing through secondary nodes 2 months before the attack. One of those nodes was traced to a facility near Anchorage, an old Arctic satellite relay reactivated under a civilian cover. Rafe frowned. "That's not a coincidence." "No," Marshfield said. "It's a mirror site used to duplicate and redirect classified data. Whoever's behind this is using outdated infrastructure because it doesn't trigger the automated detection systems." Zarya leaned forward. "So we go there." "Eventually," Marshfield said. "But first we find out who is accessing it." Rafe tapped a few keys, pulling up a feed of scrolling encryption logs. "I can piggyback the last outgoing transmission from Coronado before the blackout. If Quinlan was exfiltrated electronically, his signal might still be embedded in the cache." "Do it," Marshfield said. The room fell into silence except for the hum of equipment. Outside, waves slammed into rock, echoing like distant artillery. Minutes passed, then Rafe froze. Got something. The monitor displayed a data fragment, a line of code ending with a single word: Remnant. Marshfield's expression shifted, barely, but Boon noticed. "You know that name," he said. "I do," she replied softly. Remnant was the internal code name of a contingency program initiated after Kingfisher, a fail-safe that was supposed to protect sensitive assets. "Supposed to?" Zarya asked. "They turned it," Marshfield said. "Someone inverted the protocol from defense to infiltration." Rafe stared at the data feed. "So Remnant isn't a defense network anymore." "It's an infection," Marshfield said. "And if it's active, then we're not just fighting rogue operatives. We're fighting an entire buried system." Boon's hands curled into fists, and Quinlan's part of it. "Worse," Marshfield said. "He might believe he's saving it." That night, Boon couldn't sleep. He sat alone in the dim hallway outside the operations room, staring at the sea through a narrow observation window. The waves looked endless, like time itself refusing to rest. Every now and then he caught glimpses of movement in the reflection: Marshfield, walking the perimeter, her silhouette straight despite the limp. She never stopped moving, never gave herself stillness. He finally stood and followed her. She didn't turn when she heard him approach. "You should be sleeping." "I can't." "I know." For a while they just walked. The wind whipped across the cliff, sharp and cold. "Do you ever think it's too late to fix things?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "You don't fix things like this," she said finally. "You reveal them, then you choose whether to keep living with what you see." Boon's jaw tightened. "You've seen more than anyone. How do you keep going?" "I remember the faces that didn't get a chance to." Her voice broke slightly on the word faces. He looked at her, at the exhaustion etched into her eyes, at the way she carried both command and grief like twin burdens. "You lost people in Kingfisher." "I lost family," she said quietly. "Your father among them, but also others, friends, students. One of them turned the first mole we ever found." She stopped walking. "He was my protege, just like Quinlan was yours." The wind howled around them. "That's the worst part of betrayal," she said, almost to herself. "It doesn't come from your enemies." Neither spoke again until dawn. By morning, Rafe had something. "I cracked the Remnant signal," he said. "Or part of it. Whoever's running this left an operational signature embedded in time stamps. Same frequency cycle, same encryption style, same metadata across every relay." "Which means?" Boon asked. "It's centralized. There's a control hub." Marshfield leaned over his shoulder. "Where?" He hesitated. "You're not going to like it." "Try me." He pulled up the location. Washington, D.C., Naval Command Data Operations Division. The room fell silent. "That's our own house," Zarya whispered. Rafe nodded. "Remnant, running from inside headquarters. The infiltration didn't start from the field, it started from the top." Boon exhaled, the reality sinking in. "So if we go public?" "They'll bury it," Marshfield finished, "and us with it." Zarya's voice shook slightly. "Then what's the play?" Marshfield's eyes hardened. "We go dark. No transmissions, no digital trails. From here on, everything is analog. We gather proof they can't erase." She turned toward Boon. "You wanted to act, now you will." He nodded. "What's our move?" "There's a logistics officer in Alaska named Commander Evershaw," Marshfield said. "She handled cold storage manifests for communications hardware, the same type used in the Anchorage relay. If anyone knows where the next signal will route, it's her. We make contact off-book." "Extraction or cooperation?" Rafe asked. "Depends on what she knows," Marshfield replied. They left that night under cover of fog. A transport plane, old, unregistered, its markings long removed, carried them north. The hum of its engines filled the silence between them. Boon sat across from Marshfield, watching her review a small set of handwritten notes. No screens, no devices, just ink and memory. "You still write everything down," he said. "I don't trust clouds I can't see," she said, not looking up. He almost smiled. As they descended into Alaska's gray horizon, snow began to fall. The world below looked untouched, silent, like it had forgotten humanity existed. The base they approached was small, half-frozen, its lights dimmed to conserve power, perfect for secrecy. Zarya disembarked first, scanning the perimeter. Rafe followed, holding a portable jammer. Marshfield's orders were simple: no contact until they identified Shaw's access patterns. Hours later, Rafe found her. "Got a hit," he said quietly through the comm. "Building C, sublevel 3, she's alone." Boon moved in first. The stairwell creaked beneath his boots, the air thick with dust and machine oil. The small room below was lined with data drives and old filing cabinets. A woman sat at a desk, 40s, sharp eyes, steady hands. She didn't flinch when Boon stepped into the light. "I was wondering when you'd show up," she said calmly. Marshfield entered behind him, weapon holstered. "Evra." The woman stood, almost smiling. "It's been a long time, Admiral." "I wasn't sure which side you were on," Marshfield said. "Neither was I," Evra replied, "until I saw what they did to my team." The conversation was quiet, loaded. Evra gestured toward a steel case on the table. "That's everything I have. Transmission logs, access keys, blacklists. But there's something else, something you need to see." She slid a file across the table. Inside was a photo, blurry, satellite capture. A convoy of armored vehicles crossing a frozen landscape. "Anchorage?" Boon asked. Evra shook her head. "Further north, deep Arctic, off-grid. There's a facility there that doesn't exist on any map." Marshfield's eyes narrowed. "Remnant's core." "Possibly," Evra said. "Whatever it is, they're guarding it like a state secret." Before Marshfield could respond, the lights flickered. Rafe's voice crackled through the comm. "Admiral, we've got inbound multiple signatures, thermal imaging active." Evra cursed. "They must have traced me." Marshfield's tone went flat, pure command. "Shut everything down, move now." They moved fast. Boon grabbed the steel case. Zarya covered the rear. Through the narrow windows, flashes of red light cut across the snow, search teams closing in. Evra stopped short at the exit, turning to Marshfield. "If they catch me, they'll compromise the data." Marshfield met her eyes. "Then they won't catch you." Evra smiled faintly. "You always were a terrible liar." Before anyone could react, she pushed Marshfield back and slammed the blast door closed between them. The sound of gunfire erupted almost instantly on the other side. Boon slammed his fist against the door. "Evra." Through the muffled chaos came her final words, calm, resolute. "Get it to the sea. Don't let them bury it again." Then silence. Marshfield's face didn't move, but her hands shook just once. She turned sharply. "Move." They escaped into the storm, snow slashing across their faces. The helicopter waiting on the ridge lifted as they ran, bullets cutting through the air behind them. When they finally cleared the mountain range, Boon looked back. The base was burning, flames tearing through the white. Zarya whispered, "She bought us time." Marshfield didn't answer. She stared out the window, her reflection ghosted against the glass. Boon watched her silently. There was grief in her stillness, not just for Evra, but for all the losses that kept building like an unending debt. Finally she spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "The file she gave us, that's the key. Whatever, in that Arctic facility, it's the reason Kingfisher never ended." Boon leaned forward. "Then we finish what they started." Marshfield nodded once. "We do, but remember what I told you." She turned to him, her eyes steady but distant. "This isn't revenge." He nodded, but deep down he knew. Sometimes the line between justice and vengeance blurred so quietly, you didn't realize you crossed it until the ghost started looking back. How far do you go for a truth that might destroy you? The helicopter shuddered in the Arctic wind, its rotors struggling against the storm. Snow slashed across the windshield like shards of glass. Boon sat opposite Admiral Marshfield, clutching the steel case Evra had died for. Every bump in the air made it rattle against his boots, like it wanted to be opened, like it wanted to speak. Rafe piloted from the front, his face lit by the dull glow of old instruments. Zarya scanned the skis through a cracked side window, her rifle across her knees. No one had spoken since takeoff, not because there was nothing to say, but because words would have broken the fragile silence holding them together. Marshfield finally leaned forward. "ETA." "20 minutes, Rafe said, his voice clipped. "Satellite ping confirms a clear patch ahead, but the facility's running blackout protocols. No radio, no heat trace, no light. It's buried deep." Marshfield nodded. "Perfect." Boon looked at her. "You've been here before." "Not this one," she said, "but I've seen its blueprint. Kingfisher's final phase included contingencies for deep-sea and polar infrastructure, safe houses for data, command hubs for operations that never officially happened." "Remnant," Zarya said quietly. "Yes," Marshfield replied, "and if Evra's coordinates are right, we're heading straight to its core." The storm thickened outside, the world dissolving into gray and white. Rafe fought the controls, forcing the craft to stay level. "Brace," he shouted. The helicopter dropped violently, slammed sideways by wind. Boon grabbed the railing, his stomach flipping as the horizon vanished. "Engine losing pressure," Rafe barked. "We're too close to the ridge, can't stabilize." Marshfield's tone cut through the panic like steel. "Put her down, now." Rafe grimaced, flipped a switch, and forced the descent. The chopper hit hard, skidding across the ice before grinding to a stop. Silence. Only the groan of metal. Everyone breathed alive, barely. Marshfield was the first to move. "Status." Zarya checked the hull. "Cracked stabilizer, engine offline, we're grounded." "Then we walk," Marshfield said. "Ma'am," Rafe protested, "we're 50 miles from the coordinates." Marshfield looked through the frost-smeared windshield. "We don't need to reach it by air. We'll approach from beneath." "Beneath," Boon echoed. "There's a supply tunnel system under the ridge," she said. "Kingfisher used similar ones for covert extractions. If the site connected to Remnant, they'll have a maintenance access route." "How do you know it's still there?" She looked at him, calm, certain. "Because I built it." They set out before dawn. The landscape was endless, a world of white silence, broken only by wind and their own breathing. The Arctic sun barely lifted above the horizon, casting a thin line of cold gold across the snow. Every step was a test of will. The temperature dropped fast enough to freeze breath midair. Boon carried the steel case strapped to his back, its weight more psychological than physical. He couldn't stop thinking of Evra's voice, her last words. "Don't let them bury it again." Marshfield led from the front, her limp slower now but unrelenting. Her face was raw with windburn, her eyes fixed on the distance, calculating, remembering. Zarya moved beside Boon, quiet but alert. Rafe trailed slightly behind, checking his modified scanner for signs of magnetic activity. "Got something," Rafe said after an hour. "Subsurface metallic resonance, roughly 100 meters beneath us." Marshfield stopped. "That's it." They descended toward a ravine half covered in snow. Beneath the crusted ice, a faint glint of metal shone through. Zarya brushed the frost away, revealing a sealed hatch, military-grade, ancient, but intact. "No power source," she said. Marshfield knelt beside it, her gloved hands tracing the edge. Manual override mechanical. Good. They built it before everything went digital. Which means no easy way in, Rafe muttered. Marshfield gave him a thin smile. Nothing worth finding ever is. They pried it open with a hydraulic jack and a lot of muscle. The hatch groaned, the sound echoing deep into the frozen dark. A gust of stale air rushed out, air that hadn't seen daylight in decades. Boon switched on his flashlight. The beam cut through layers of dust and frost, revealing a steep metal staircase descending into black. "After you, ma'am," he said. She gave him a brief nod, the kind of silent trust that had replaced formality between them, and started down. The tunnel was narrow and cold, walls sweating condensation, their breath fogged in the beam light. "Power grid's dormant," Rafe whispered. "No current, but I'm picking faint residual charge. Someone used this within the last 6 months." "Then we're not alone," Marshfield said. They reached a sealed pressure door marked with faded text, "Project Kingfisher, Archive Node 7. Zarya's eyes widened. "Kingfisher, it's still active." Marshfield's voice dropped. "No, it's been repurposed." She connected a manual bypass, sparks flickering as circuits reawakened. The door groaned open, releasing a hiss of stale air and the faint scent of machine oil. Beyond it, a corridor stretched out, lined with lights that flickered to life, one after another, like something waking up. "This place isn't abandoned," Rafe murmured. They moved deeper. Rows of servers lined the walls, humming faintly. Frozen dust clung to cables like cobwebs. In the center stood a single console, active, glowing pale blue. Boon approached cautiously. Someone left it running. Marshfield stared at it, her jaw tight. "Or it's been waiting." She inserted Evra's drive into the console. The screen flashed, then stabilized. Lines of data scrolled, encrypted files, mission logs, names. Rafe's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Decrypting now." Marshfield's eyes followed the text as it resolved, word by word, and when it did, her face changed. The calm vanished. "What is it?" Boon asked. She didn't answer immediately. Her lips moved silently as she read, then she whispered, "Kingfisher was never shut down. They told us it was a purge, but it was a seed." "A seed," Zarya repeated. Marshfield looked at them, her eyes cold. They used Kingfisher's cleanup missions to plant Remnant. Every operation that was meant to expose corruption instead created the infrastructure for it. Boon felt his chest tighten. "You mean my father?" She met his gaze. "Your father wasn't fighting corruption, Boon. He was being used to establish it." The words hit harder than any bullet. "No," he said, he saved people." "He did," Marshfield said softly. "And that's why they killed him. He discovered the inversion before I did." The silence that followed was unbearable. Rafe finally spoke. "There's more, look at this." He pointed to a section of the decrypted file. A list of code names scrolled down, each tied to operational units, each tagged with one word, REPLACED. Zarya's voice broke. "These are real people, operators, commanders." "And one of them," Rafe said grimly, "is still active." The name froze on the screen. Admiral Jonas Blackkwll. Boon's blood ran cold. "Our commander." Marshfield didn't blink. "No, their commander." It made sense now, the way Blackwell had acted at Coronado, his evasive tone, his warnings. He wasn't helping them. He was steering them. Rafe slammed a hand on the console. "We were being tested from day one." Marshfield's face hardened. "And now we test them back." She turned toward the terminal, inserting another key from her vest. "We copy everything, then we burn it." Boon hesitated. "Burn it, this is proof." "This is a beacon," she countered. "If they trace it, we're dead before we can use it." He didn't argue further. He saw the truth in her eyes, a veteran's instinct, one that didn't gamble with survival. The data transfer began. the screen flashing as file after file downloaded into the portable drive. Zarya scanned the hall. Movement. Where? Thermal ping approaching fast. Marshfield's jaw clenched. They found us. The sound came next, boots striking metal, synchronized, disciplined. Boon, she said sharply, grab the drive. He ripped it from the console, the lights flickering as power surged through the room. Rafe shut the door. The pressure hatch sealed just as the first impact hit from the other side. Metal groaned under the assault. Alternate exit, Boon asked. Marshfield pointed to a side maintenance corridor. It leads to the ventilation shaft. Move. They ran, their flashlights cutting through the dark. The sound of the breach followed them, gunfire, boots, shouts distorted by echo. As they reached the shaft ladder, Marshfield stopped. Go ahead, she ordered. Boon turned. Ma'am. I'll hold them. No, not again, he said, stepping toward her. You told me my father died because he wouldn't leave his team. Don't make me repeat it. For a moment, their eyes locked, not commander to soldier, but mother to son, leader to legacy. Then quietly she said, You're right. She climbed the ladder beside him. They emerged onto the frozen ridge as the first explosion rocked the tunnel behind them. Flames burst upward, the ground trembling beneath their boots. The cold wind hit their faces, but the light from the blast painted everything gold and red. Rafe stumbled, coughing. Zarya helped him up. We have the data, she shouted. Marshfield turned toward the horizon, where a faint light glowed in the distance, the polar dawn. Then we finish this, she said. Boon looked at her. By going where? She met his gaze, calm, unyielding. Home, Washington. If we're going to end Remnant, we do it where it was born. The wind howled around them, scattering snow into spirals. Somewhere deep below, the remains of Kingfisher burned, and with it, the last illusion of loyalty. For the first time, Boon understood what his father had really fought for. Not command, not country, but the right to know the truth before you die. And now, that burden belonged to him. How do you face the system you once swore to serve, when you finally see what it truly is? The C-17 transport rattled as it descended through the gray clouds above Washington. Below, the Potomac cut through the city like a vein of dark glass. The Capitol looked calm, a lie told beautifully. Inside the cargo bay, Boon sat strapped in, staring at the black case on his lap. The drive they'd taken from the Arctic base. The one that held every secret, every betrayal, every erased name. Marshfield sat across from him, unreadable as always. Zarya checked their exit plan one last time while Rafe adjusted the signal jammer rigged inside a duffel bag. Last chance to back out, Rafe said, his voice flat but not unkind. Boon almost smiled. You know better. Zarya didn't look up from her maps. We're ghosts now. There's no going back. Marshfield's eyes lingered on them, pride, sorrow, and something deeper, all hidden behind military calm. Remember, she said, our goal isn't to destroy, it's to expose. Expose to who? Boon asked quietly. Command's infected, media's controlled. The second we transmit this, they'll bury it under 10 layers of national security. That's why we don't transmit it, Marshfield said. We show it in person. Rafe's brows furrowed. Meaning? There's a joint intelligence summit at the Pentagon tomorrow, she said. Every senior official in Naval Command will be there, including Admiral Blackwell. That's our window. Zarya glanced up, skeptical, and our plan to walk into the Pentagon uninvited. Marshfield reached into her coat and produced a set of forged credentials, each marked with high-level clearance codes. Old habits die hard. Rafe gave a low whistle. You really don't trust retirement, do you? She ignored the joke. Once we're inside, we reach the primary briefing room. Rafe, you'll access the internal display system. Boon, you'll present the data packet. Zarya. Cover extraction, she finished. I know. Marshfield nodded once. We'll only get one shot. They landed at a small, unregistered airfield outside Quantico just after midnight. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of rain. A black SUV waited near the hangar, arranged through one of Marshfield's old contacts who asked no questions and expected no payment. Washington was different at night, streets empty, monuments shadowed, the city's power sleeping under layers of silence. As they drove, Boon stared at the Capitol dome in the distance, its reflection trembling in the rain-slicked roads. You ever think about what happens after? He asked softly. Marshfield didn't answer right away. After what? When we win. Her eyes stayed on the road. Winning isn't a word I use anymore. Zarya looked back from the passenger seat. Then what do you call it? Balance, she said. Just enough truth to keep the scales from breaking. They pulled into an abandoned maintenance tunnel that led beneath one of the auxiliary Pentagon annexes. The entrance had been sealed decades ago, officially decommissioned. Rafe cracked the old security locks in silence, fingers moving fast, deliberate. The heavy door opened with a slow hiss. They stepped inside, 4 ghosts in a place built to erase them. Inside the annex, the fluorescent lights flickered weakly, illuminating peeling walls and forgotten signage. Rafe powered up a handheld scanner. No motion, no active cameras, we're ghosts here. Marshfield moved ahead, her limp more pronounced but her pace steady. Stay alert. They built these tunnels for continuity of government. If Blackwell's paranoid enough, he'll have them reconnected. They advanced through the narrow hall until it split. Zarya whispered, movement 2 floors above. Rafe glanced at his monitor. Thermal 3 signatures stationary, probably night shift. Then we go quiet, Marshfield ordered. They climbed an old service stairwell, the air thick with dust and history. Each step felt heavier, not just from the climb, but from the weight of what waited above. At the top, Marshfield stopped and looked at Boon. Once we're inside that room, the only weapon that matters is the truth. You ready? Boon nodded, though part of him wasn't sure. Always. Good. She handed him the drive. Your father once told me something before Kingfisher launched. He said, the mission isn't what they give us, it's what we make of it. Boon looked at her, emotion tight in his throat. I'll make it count. The Pentagon at dawn was a different kind of battlefield. Polished floors, echoing voices, suits and ribbons instead of rifles and dust. Disguised in civilian contractor attire, they moved through the corridors like any other delegation. Marshfield's bearing, even without insignia, made people instinctively step aside. Some nodded, unsure if they should recognize her, others too afraid to ask. They reached the briefing wing. A massive digital board listed scheduled sessions. In 30 minutes, the intelligence summit would begin. Rafe, Marshfield said, you're up. He moved to a side terminal, connecting his modified transceiver. Lines of code ran across his handheld. Looping security cams. We're invisible for 10 minutes. Zarya perimeter. Copy. Boon, Marshfield said softly, with me. They entered the main conference hall. It was vast, high ceilings, flags along the walls, a semicircle of monitors waiting to display sanitized truths. Marshfield moved to the central console, inserted her access key, and nodded to Boon. He placed the drive onto the terminal. You sure this won't trigger their counter-firewalls? It will, she said. That's how we'll know they're watching. The data loaded, images, names, operation files, the word Remnant stamped across half of them. And then the door opened. Admiral Jonas Blackwell entered with his entourage, crisp uniform, polished metals, and the calm arrogance of a man who believed in untouchable power. He froze when he saw her. Deline, his voice was coldly polite, you're supposed to be retired. Marshfield turned slowly, and you were supposed to be loyal. A flicker of tension passed through the room. Blackwell dismissed his aides with a wave. They hesitated, then obeyed. The door shut behind them. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. "And yet," Marshfield replied, "here I am, standing in the building we both swore to protect. Tell me, Jonas, how many ghosts did you bury under it to keep your seat warm?" His expression didn't change. "You don't understand. Kingfisher failed because we tried to fight corruption. Remnant succeeded because we learned to use it." Boon stepped forward. "Use it? You turned soldiers into shadows." Blackwell's gaze flicked to him. "You must be Castellano's son." The name hit like a slap. Boon's hand twitched toward his weapon, but Marshfield raised a hand, steady, silent command. Blackwell continued, voice smooth and poisonous. "Your father was a good man, brave but naive. He couldn't see the bigger picture." "What picture?" Boon demanded. "The real one," Blackwell said. "Control, stability. Without Remnant, chaos wins. Without order, truth eats itself alive." Marshfield's tone cut through him. "That's not order. That's tyranny with better PR." He smiled thinly. "Call it what you want. The world runs on perception, not integrity." Boon's voice cracked. "You killed them, all those names in the file. You used them like pieces on a board." Blackwell stepped closer. "Pieces win wars, son. Ideals don't." The room went still. The tension between them was electric, years of buried betrayal pressing against the surface. Marshfield's voice softened, almost mournful. "We built something to defend freedom, Jonas, and you turned it into a cage." Blackwell shook his head. "Freedom is chaos. What we built ensures survival." "Whose?" she asked. He hesitated, and that single pause told Boon everything. Rafe's voice came through their comms, quiet and tense. "We've got movement, security en route, 2 minutes." Marshfield didn't flinch. "Then we finish it." She turned the monitor toward Blackwell and pressed play. The room filled with images, footage from Kingfisher, internal logs, classified mission reports that shouldn't exist. Names, faces, timelines. Every lie he'd buried now glowed across the walls. Blackwell froze, his mask slipping for the first time. "You can't prove any of it." Marshfield smiled, small, tired, victorious. "I don't have to. I just have to let them see it." Outside the glass wall, through the blinds, uniformed officers had gathered, drawn by the broadcast feeding through internal monitors across the building. Rafe had rerouted the feed. Everyone was watching. Blackwell's composure cracked. "You think this will change anything? They'll clean it up before noon. You'll disappear again." Marshfield's gaze didn't waver. "Maybe, but this time you disappear with me." The doors burst open. Armed security flooded in, not to arrest her, but to surround him. One of the officers stepped forward, voice tight. "Sir, commands requesting you relinquish your ID immediately." Blackwell's face turned pale. "You don't understand." But it was too late. The truth was already loose. He turned toward Marshfield, fury barely masked by disbelief. "You think they'll thank you for this?" Her eyes softened. "No, but they'll remember." He lunged, rage overtaking reason, but Boon stepped between them, one firm motion stopping him cold. "Enough," Boon said quietly. The Admiral froze, then laughed bitterly. "You sound just like your father." Boon's voice was steady. "He died a soldier, you'll die a memory." Security pulled him away. His protests echoed down the corridor until they vanished. When silence returned, Boon turned to Marshfield. "It's over." She shook her head faintly. "No, it's ended. There's a difference." Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear but release. Years of burden lifting, leaving only exhaustion behind. Zarya entered, whispering, "Feed still live." Everyone saw it. "Good," Marshfield said. "Then maybe they'll start asking the right questions." Boon looked at her, something like admiration and grief tangled in his chest. "What happens to us now?" Marshfield glanced toward the window, the rising sun catching her reflection in the glass. We vanish, like we were meant to. And for the first time, she smiled, small, real, human. What remains when the mission is over, but the silence still won't let go. Morning light poured through the Pentagon windows, washing away the smoke of the storm that had just passed. The corridors were hushed. No alarms, no gunfire, only the faint hum of systems rebooting, as if the building itself were trying to remember what it used to be. Boon sat alone in a briefing room that smelled of ozone and burnt circuits. On the table before him lay the black case. Empty now. Evidence already in federal custody, transmitted to oversight committees, whispered through networks that hadn't said the word remnant aloud in years. Across from him, Zarya poured 2 paper cups of coffee, her hands still trembling slightly. They've detained Blackwell, full tribunal pending. Boon nodded. He hadn't spoken much since dawn. Rafe entered a moment later, bruised and exhausted, holding a small flash drive. Backup copy, hidden partition, analog conversion. No one can delete this version without a hammer. Boon stared at it. Keep it that way. Rafe set it down, looked around the empty room. Where? The Admiral. Zarya hesitated. She left an hour ago. She what? Walked out, she said softly. No one stopped her, no one could. Boon's chest tightened. Where did she go? Zarya met his eyes. She didn't say, only that her part was finished. He found her near the reflecting pool, sitting on a bench overlooking the water. The city around her buzzed with ordinary life again, traffic, tourists, joggers. But she looked separate from all of it, like a relic from a forgotten war. Her uniform jacket was gone, replaced by a simple gray coat. The morning breeze tugged at her silver hair. Boon approached quietly. You could have stayed. She didn't turn. I've spent half my life sitting in rooms like that. I've said everything words can do. They'll need your testimony. They'll have my record, she said. That's enough. He sat beside her. For a long time neither spoke. The water rippled, carrying the reflection of the Washington Monument across its surface like a scar. Finally she said, You did what your father never got the chance to. Boon looked down. He deserved better than silence. He has it now, she said gently. The truth has a voice again. He studied her profile, the faint lines around her eyes, the small tremor in her hand as she held her coffee. You're leaving, aren't you? She smiled, but it was tired. You can't fight forever. Someone has to live. Where will you go? Somewhere quiet, she said. There's a cottage on the Oregon coast I used to dream about. Maybe I'll finally see what it looks like in the daylight. He tried to picture her there, without rank, without duty, just human, and couldn't. She must have seen it on his face because she chuckled softly. Don't look so surprised, Castellano. Even ghosts retire eventually. He nodded, unsure if he believed her. And us. You keep going, she said. You train the ones who come after you to ask better questions. You teach them that obedience is not loyalty. Her words landed like quiet commandments. I don't know if I can lead, he admitted. You already did, she said. Last night when you chose restraint over vengeance. She stood then, leaning on her cane, the prosthetic clicking faintly on the pavement. Tell Zarya and Rafe to stay off record. They'll come for stories, for interviews. Decline them all. He rose with her, Admiral. She stopped him with a glance. Deline, she corrected, just Deline now. Then she touched his shoulder, the briefest, gentlest gesture, and walked away down the path. The morning crowd swallowed her until she was only another figure among the living. Boon watched until he couldn't see her anymore. Weeks passed. Investigations tore through the command chain like a controlled fire. Half a dozen resignations followed. 2 officers vanished before hearings began. The word remnant appeared once in a leaked memo, then disappeared again, classified beyond reach. But the current had changed, quietly. Zarya accepted an overseas advisory post. Rafe went underground, freelancing as a systems auditor for whistleblower networks. They stayed in touch through dead drops and coded messages, each signing their notes with a single word: balance. Boon returned to training officially as a consultant, unofficially as the ghost who rewrote the curriculum. He stripped away the arrogance, the blind obedience. He added something new to the first week's lecture, a single slide with a question. Who do you serve when the flag is wrong? Some recruits stared confused, others wrote it down. He never explained the question. He just let it sit there, an unanswered echo. Late one evening, months later, a sealed envelope arrived at his quarters. No sender, no markings. Inside was a single photograph, sunset over a rugged coastline, a small cottage silhouetted against the waves. On the back, written in firm, elegant handwriting: "Still standing, D." He smiled. For the first time in years, the smile reached his eyes. But peace never stays quiet for long. One autumn night, while reviewing logistics reports, Boon noticed an encrypted data ping buried deep inside the network, a residual signal marked with an obsolete tag: Remnant null node. He froze. The frequency was faint, intermittent, but it wasn't dead. He traced it carefully through shadowed routes until it ended on a civilian satellite relay in the Arctic, the same coordinates they'd left in flames. The site was alive again. He leaned back in his chair, the room suddenly too still. For a long moment he considered erasing the trace, pretending he hadn't seen it, pretending that ghosts could really rest. Then he smiled faintly, shaking his head. "Of course you're still out there." He stood, pocketed the trident coin that now hung from his dog tags, and whispered to the empty room, "Time for round 2, Dad." The next morning he mailed a single envelope to Oregon. Inside was a printed line of code, handwritten coordinates, and one sentence: "It's not over, but we're ready now." The story spread slowly, never on television, never in headlines. Whispers in corridors, rumors among units, a handful of quiet reforms that no one claimed credit for. The kind of change that happens when truth travels by word of mouth, soldier to soldier, heart to heart. Years later, when recruits spoke of Admiral Marshfield, no one agreed on whether she'd ever really existed. Some said she'd died in the line of duty. Others swore they'd seen her walking along a coastal highway, wind in her hair, smiling like someone who'd finally forgiven the world. But every so often, when a young officer paused before giving an order, remembering the weight of conscience over command, someone older would nod and say quietly, "That's her legacy." And Boon, older now, calmer, carrying the silver streaks of time in his hair, stood once more at the edge of the sea. The waves crashed below, relentless as memory. He held the trident coin between his fingers, feeling its worn edges, its history. He thought of his father's voice, of Marshfield's calm, of the countless names buried under code names and operations. He closed his fist around the coin and whispered to the wind, "You were right. Dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts." The tide surged, covering the rocks, washing over his boots. He didn't move. Above him, the horizon burned gold, the same color as that long-ago explosion over the Arctic, the same color as dawn. The mission was over. The war was. But for the first time, the world felt a little closer to honest. And that, he thought, was enough.